No one understood the Japanese girl, not the receptionist who laughed when she heard the word inheritance, not the lawyers who had built careers on billion-dollar estates, not even the experts who stared at the document and quietly admitted, this language shouldn't exist. She was 12 years old. She had crossed the Pacific Ocean alone. And in her hands, she carried a yellowed envelope sealed with red wax containing a message no one in Los Angeles could read. Inside that envelope was the key to $500 million, and a truth buried for more than 60 years. They called her confused. They called her a liar. Some even whispered the word fraud, until something happened that none of them could explain. Because in the middle of the most powerful law firm in California, when professors failed, translators gave up, and logic reached its limit, a gardener stepped forward and spoke her language, not just Japanese, but the language of grief, the language of rejection, the language of truth. And when he began to read the document aloud, the room fell silent, because some translations don't come from dictionaries. They come from heaven. Before we continue, take a moment to support this mission. If stories of faith, miracles, and hope move your heart, subscribe to the YouTube channel Heaven Walks With Us. Leave a comment and tell us where you're rewatching from and what time it is right now. We read every single one. And if you have a prayer request, leave it too. Now, take a breath, because what you're about to hear changed every life in that room forever. The Bradford Pierce building rose over downtown Los Angeles like a monument to certainty. 42 floors of glass and steel reflected the California sun with ruthless confidence, standing at the edge of Bunker Hill, where power dressed well and spoke quietly. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly of polished stone and expensive coffee. Shoes clicked with purpose across marble floors. Voices stayed low, controlled. This was a place where people didn't ask if they would win, only how much. At exactly 9:17 a.m. the glass doors slid open, and a child walked in. Sakura Yamamoto was 12 years old, though she looked younger. She wore a gray sweater that had been washed too many times, jeans with a small patch sewn carefully at the knee, and white sneakers that no longer looked white. Her black hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail, strands escaping around her face as she hesitated just inside the doorway. In her hands, she held a yellowed envelope, not new, not clean, sealed with a dark red wax stamp pressed into an unfamiliar symbol. She took one step forward, then another. Behind the reception desk sat Jennifer Miller, mid-30s, blonde, impeccably dressed. She glanced up over the rim of her designer glasses, already frowning before she fully registered what she was seeing. "Yes," Jennifer asked. "Can I help you?" Sakura swallowed. She had practiced this sentence for weeks quietly in her grandmother's apartment on the long flight across the Pacific, in the airport bathroom mirror. "I need to speak with Mither Bradford," she said carefully, each word deliberate. "It is important." Jennifer blinked. Then she smiled. "It wasn't he kind." "Sweetheart," she said, her tone light but dismissive, "this is a law firm. Do you have an appointment?" Sakura shook her head. Jennifer's eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to the girl's face. "And your parents?" she asked. "Are they with you?" Sakura tightened her grip. "I don't have parents," she replied softly. "Please, the document." Jennifer exhaled through her nose and leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Thomas Bradford is one of the most sought after estate attorneys in California," she said. "He doesn't meet with walk-ins. Especially not." She paused, glancing down at Sakura again. "Children. People nearby slowed as they passed, curious, amused. Sakura felt heat rise to her cheeks. "My great-grandfather," she said, her voice trembling now. "His name is Kenji Yamamoto. He left something. I am family." The name caused a ripple. A man near the elevators stopped walking. Another lifted his head. The Jennifer laughed softly. "Kenji Yamamoto," she repeated. "The tech billionaire who died without heirs." Sakura nodded. "There is an inheritance," she whispered. $500 million. The lobby went silent. Then the laughter came. Not cruel but confident. Certain. Jennifer covered her mouth, shaking her head. "Security," she said calmly, pressing a button beneath the desk. Sakura stood frozen, the envelope pressed against her chest. She had crossed an ocean for this moment. And before she could even sit down, the building had already decided she didn't belong. A Thomas Bradford appeared at the top of the marble staircase, like someone stepping onto a stage he owned. He was tall, over 6 feet, his posture straight, his movements economical. His suit was dark, tailored within an inch of perfection, the kind of suit that announced money without ever naming it. A thin streak of gray cut cleanly through his hair at the temples, intentional enough to look distinguished rather than aged. People moved when he moved. Assistants shifted aside. Conversations lowered. Even Jennifer straightened in her chair. "What's going on?" Thomas asked, his voice calm but sharp, the voice of a man used to answers arriving quickly. Jennifer gestured toward Sakura. "A child. Bradford. She claims she has an inheritance matter. Says she's related to Kenji Yamamoto." Thomas stopped walking. For a fraction of a second, so brief most people would miss it, his eyes changed. Then he laughed. Not mockingly, not cruelly. Professionally. "The Kenji Yamamoto," he repeated, descending the stairs. "The man whose estate I've been managing for 3 months. The man who died without a single verified heir." He stopped directly in front of Sakura. The difference in height made her tilt her head back to look at him. "And you are?" he asked. "Sakura Yamamoto," she replied, her voice barely steady. "I am his family." Thomas studied her the way he studied documents, looking for inconsistencies, for gaps, for angles that didn't line up. "How old are you?" he asked. 12. "And you traveled here alone?" "Yes." That earned a raised eyebrow. "Who sent you?" Thomas asked. "A lawyer, an agent. A relative hoping to test our system." "No," Sakura said quickly. "My grandmother. She died." A pause. Thomas glanced at the envelope in her hands. "What's that?" Sakura held it out. Thomas did not take it. "What do you think you're holding?" he asked instead. "My great-grandfather's will," Sakura said. "He wrote it so no one could lie." A few nearby associates exchanged amused looks. Thomas finally reached forward and took the envelope between 2 fingers, as if it might stain him. He turned it over once. The wax seal caught his attention, but only briefly. "You know," he said, handing it back, "I've seen hundreds of claims like this. People appear with letters, photographs, stories about secret children and forgotten lovers." His tone remained even, almost kind. "Do you know how many of them are real?" he asked. Sakura shook her head. "None," Thomas said. The word landed like a verdict. "Kenji Yamamoto was meticulous," Thomas continued. "Every asset, every account, every legal pathway documented. If there had been a child, any child, we would know. But he hid it," Sakura said, desperation slipping through now. "Because he was afraid." Thomas sighed. "Fear doesn't erase law," he said. "And belief isn't evidence." He glanced toward Jennifer. Call security. Make sure the child isn't wandering the building. Sakura felt the room tilt. Please, she said. Just look. Just read it. Thomas met her eyes. And for the first time, his certainty wavered not because he believed her, but because something about her refusal to back down unsettled him. Fine, he said at last. 5 minutes. He turned sharply. Conference room B. Bring the document. As Sakura followed him past the reception desk, clutching the envelope like a lifeline, she didn't notice what Thomas did. That he slowed his pace. Just slightly. As if, somewhere beneath 30 years of winning, a question had begun to form. Conference room B was colder than the lobby. Not in temperature but in intention. The walls were glass, transparent yet isolating, designed to remind anyone inside that they were being watched, measured, assessed. Thomas Bradford took his seat at the head of the table without removing his jacket. 2 senior associates lingered near the door, curious but cautious. Sakura sat opposite him, her legs dangling again, the envelope resting on the table between them like an accusation. All right, Thomas said, folding his hands. You have my attention. Briefly. Sakura nodded. Her fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. Inside were several folded sheets, covered in unfamiliar characters, and 1 photograph. She slid the photograph across the table. Thomas barely glanced at it at first. Then he stopped. The photo was old, edges softened with age, the colors faded just enough to suggest years, not days. It showed a man in his late 60s, standing in a small garden. His posture was relaxed, his expression unguarded in a way Thomas had never seen in any press image. Kenji Yamamoto. Beside him stood a little girl, maybe 5 years old, holding his hand. Her face was unmistakable. The same almond-shaped eyes. The same curve of the cheek. The same quiet seriousness. Thomas picked up the photograph. Where did you get this? He asked. My grandmother took it, Sakura said softly. 7 years ago. In Tokyo, in his garden. Thomas flipped the photo over. A date. A location. Kenji's handwriting. His jaw tightened. This could be altered, he said. Photos can be manipulated. It isn't Sakura replied, her voice firmer now. My grandmother never lied. One of the associates leaned closer. If this is real, he murmured, that child would change everything. Thomas finished. He looked up at Sakura. You said your grandmother, he said slowly, claimed Kenji Yamamoto was your great-grandfather. Yes. That would mean, Thomas continued, he had a child no one knew about. A child born outside his public life. Sakura nodded. He was afraid, she said. His family would never accept her. Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying the ceiling as if the answer might be written there. Kenji Yamamoto had been notoriously private. No marriage. No children. No scandals. At least, none on record. This photo alone isn't enough, Thomas said finally. But it is inconvenient. Sakura looked up. Inconvenient. For the narrative we thought we knew, he clarified. He set the photograph down carefully, no longer dismissively. Now, he said, tapping the folded papers, let's talk about this document. Sakura hesitated. No one can read it. So you keep saying, Thomas replied. But I'd like to see why. He unfolded the first page. The characters were precise. Elegant. Nothing like the modern Japanese contracts he had encountered in the past. This isn't standard, he admitted quietly. The associate frowned. What is it? Thomas didn't answer. Because, for the first time since Sakura had entered the building, Thomas Bradford felt something shift. Not belief, but doubt. Awe and doubt in his world was dangerous. Thomas unfolded the document with deliberate care. The paper was thicker than he expected, slightly textured, faintly yellowed, as if it had been chosen to endure time rather than impress a court. As the pages opened, a quiet tension settled over the room. The characters were beautiful. Too beautiful. They flowed with balance and symmetry, strokes precise yet expressive, arranged in a structure Thomas had never seen in any modern Japanese contract. There were no headings, no numbered clauses, no seals of a notary public. "This isn't illegal Japanese," one of the associates said, leaning closer. Thomas nodded. "It's not business Japanese either." He scanned the page again, slower this time. "There are no dates in the usual format," he murmured. "No addresses. No witnesses listed." Sakura clasped her hands together. "My great-grandfather said he wrote it so only the truth would survive." Thomas looked up. "Your great-grandfather said that." "My grandmother told me," Sakura replied. She said, "He didn't trust the world." Thomas exhaled through his nose. That at least sounded like Kenji Yamamoto. He stood abruptly. "Jennifer," he called. Jennifer appeared at the doorway almost instantly. "Yes, Mr. Bradford." "Get Akiko Matsuda," Thomas said. "Our certified Japanese translator. I want her here now." The minutes later, Akiko entered mid-40s, impeccably dressed, carrying a leather folder under her arm. She had worked with Bradford Pierce for over a decade, translating contracts, patents, and international filings worth billions. She took one look at the document and frowned. "This isn't modern Japanese," she said immediately. The Thomas raised an eyebrow. "How certain are you?" Akiko adjusted her glasses and leaned closer. "I can recognize individual characters," she explained. "But the grammar is ceremonial, almost ritualized." She flipped through the pages, her confidence visibly eroding. "I can translate perhaps 20%, she admitted. "But the rest this isn't taught. Not anymore." The associate exchanged a look with Thomas. "So what is it?" Akiko hesitated. "It appears to be a lineage-based form of writing. Some noble families maintained private linguistic traditions. The meanings depend on family context, not dictionary definitions." Thomas felt a familiar frustration rise. "You retelling me," he said, "that our expert translator cannot translate this document." Akiko nodded slowly, not fully, and certainly not with legal certainty. Silence filled the room. Sakura's shoulders slumped. Thomas closed the document and placed it back on the table. "Call in specialists," he said at last. "Academics, historians, anyone who might recognize this." He looked at Sakura not unkindly, but guarded. "This just became complicated," he said. Sakura lowered her eyes. She had come all this way believing the words would speak for themselves. Instead, the words had become another wall. And walls, Thomas Bradford knew very well, were rarely built by accident. The meeting ended without ceremony. Chairs scraped back. Folders snapped shut. Voices dropped to professional murmurs as people began gathering their things, already moving on to the next case. The next problem that made more sense. Sakura stayed where she was. Thomas Bradford checked his phone, then spoke without looking at her. "Jennifer will arrange a hotel for the night," he said. "Tomorrow we will determine next steps." Sakura nodded, unsure what next steps meant. Margaret Foster approached her slowly, crouching down so they were eye level. "You did nothing wrong," Margaret said gently. "Sometimes the process is just." Slow Sakura tried to smile. "Thank you," she said, the words careful, practiced. "I will wait." But Thomas wasn't finished. "There is something you need to understand," he said, finally turning toward her. His voice had regained its edge, the tone he used when explaining consequences. "This is the United States," he continued. "Claims of inheritance, especially international ones, are heavily regulated. Without verifiable proof, pursuing this further could expose you to serious legal issues." Sakura's chest tightened. "What kind?" "Issues?" she asked. Thomas hesitated, then spoke plainly. "Fraud allegations, immigration scrutiny, potential involvement of child services." The words landed one by one. Fraud, immigration, child services. Margaret shot him a look. "Thomas, she needs to hear this," he said firmly. "Because if this document turns out to be fabricated, even unintentionally, there will be consequences." Sakura stared at the floor. "I didn't make it," she whispered. "My great-grandfather wrote it." Thomas sighed. "I understand that you believe that." The sentence hurt more than if he had called her a liar outright. Jennifer appeared at the doorway. "The car is ready," she said, her tone awkward now. Less dismissive, almost apologetic. Sakura stood. She clutched the yellow envelope to her chest as if it might disappear if she let go. At the elevator, Margaret leaned close and slipped a business card into Sakura's hand. If you need anything tonight," she said quietly, "call me. No matter what." Sakura nodded, her throat too tight to speak. By morning, Sakura Yamamoto was no longer afraid of being rejected. She was afraid of being sent away. By the time Sakura was escorted back into the building, the conference room no longer felt like a place of answers. It felt like a battleground. The long table was now cluttered with folders, laptops, legal pads, and half-empty cups of coffee. New faces had joined the room, people who carried titles instead of empathy. Judober Hiroshi Tanaka, professor emeritus of Japanese studies at UCLA, adjusted his round glasses as he leaned over the document. Beside him sat Dr. Kiko Sato, a specialist in historical East Asian manuscripts. At the far end, a representative from the Japanese consulate flipped through copies with growing unease. Thomas Bradford presided over them all, his jaw clenched, his patience thinning by the minute. "I want clarity," Thomas said. "Not theories, not maybes." Dr. Tanaka cleared his throat. "The script itself is unusual. It resembles classical Japanese, but the structure deviates from standard forms taught today." "How much can you translate?" Thomas pressed. "Fragments," Tanaka admitted. "Single terms, phrases, but the deeper meaning, no." Dr. Sato nodded. "It appears to follow a lineage, specific convention. Without generational context, it's extremely difficult." The consulate representative frowned. "We've contacted Tokyo. They advised consulting archives. This could take months." Thomas exhaled sharply. "Months." Legally, Richard Chen added, "without a verified translation, this document holds no weight in a U.S. court." Sakura sat quietly at the side of the room. They were talking about her, not to her. Margaret noticed. "She's here," Margaret said softly. "We should remember that." Thomas waved a hand. "We re-handling it." Dr. Tanaka leaned back, rubbing his temples. "Some characters appear ceremonial. Their meaning changes depending on family history we cannot verify. So even with time," Margaret asked, "you still might not fully understand it." "That's correct," Tanaka replied. Thomas walked to the window, staring down at the city below. "Until this document can be translated with certainty," he said, "there is no case." Sakura felt the floor drop away beneath her. "No case." Margaret opened her mouth to protest, but stopped. Because she knew. The system had reached its limit. Logic had failed. No one in that room realized it yet, but by exhausting every rational explanation, they had prepared the ground for something else entirely. The Sakura didn't remember standing up. One moment she was sitting, her feet not touching the floor. The next, she was moving fast past the table, past the suits, past the words she no longer understood. "I am sorry," she whispered, though she wasn't sure to whom. Then she ran. Out of the building. Into the garden. She collapsed onto the bench beneath the jacaranda tree and finally let herself cry. Not quietly. Not politely. She cried the way children cry when they believe something has broken forever. "I did everything right," she whispered in Japanese, her voice breaking. "Why did it work?" Footsteps crunched softly on the gravel path behind her. She did turn. The voice that spoke was quiet, gentle. Sometimes, it said, the loneliest moment isn't when you're alone. It's when you tell the truth. And no one believes you. Sakura lifted her head slowly. And that was when she saw him. The man in white work clothes. Standing in the garden. Looking at her not as a problem to solve, not as a story to dismiss, but as someone worth stopping for. Someone worth seeing. The garden was quiet in a way the building never was. Sakura sat on the bench, her shoulders shaking. Sometimes a voice said softly, "The hardest thing isn't being wrong. It's being right. And having no one understand you." Sakura flinched. A man stood a few feet away, holding pruning shears. A white work overall, smudged with soil. Brown hair past his shoulders. Calm face. Eyes that carried something ancient and tender. "I am sorry," Sakura said instinctively, wiping her cheeks. "I didn't mean to be here. I'll go." "You don't need to go," the man said gently. Then he spoke again, this time in perfect Japanese. "You fi love be other Brit kulov, ifen ipiwok." Her breath caught. You speak Japanese?" Sakura asked. "I speak many languages," he said. "But I listen first." "No one can read it," she whispered. "They say it might take months. Or years. Or maybe never. Some things aren't written to be understood quickly," he said. "What's your name?" she asked. He met her gaze. "Jesus," he said simply. The name hung in the air between them. "That's unusual," she said. "Yes," he replied gently. "People often say that." He leaned forward slightly. "If there was someone who could read those words," he asked, "someone who understood not just the language, but the heart behind it, would you trust them?" "Yes," Sakura said without thinking. He stood and extended his hand. "Then come with me," he said. "They deserve to hear the truth." And for the first time since she had entered that building, Sakura felt something she had felt all day. Not hope. Safety. The door closed behind them with a soft click. The conference table stretched the length of the room, polished so perfectly it reflected the ceiling lights. Framed awards lined the walls. Every chair was occupied. Thomas Bradford sat at the head of the table, jaw tight. Senior partners, consultants, and experts filled the room. Judar Tanaka and a consulate representative sat at the far end, folders stacked neatly. And at the side of the room out of place, unmistakably so stood a man in a white gardener's overall. "This is highly irregular," one of the partners said sharply. "We are in the middle of a closed legal review." Jesus said nothing. Thomas cleared his throat. "Sakura, you should wait outside." "No," Jesus said calmly. The word landed heavier than anyone expected. Thomas looked up. "Excuse me." "She belongs here," Jesus continued. "This is her story." A murmur rippled through the room. "Who are you?" Another attorney demanded. "Security." Before anyone could move, something in his calm stopped them, like the room itself had decided to listen. Margaret Foster raised her hand slightly. "Wait," We've spent hours discussing this case, Margaret said. We've called experts who told us it's impossible. She looked at Jesus. And now someone is saying it isn't tea. Dr. Tanaka leaned forward. If he claims he can translate, we should at least hear him. Richard Chen shifted. If he's wrong, we lose nothing. If he's right. Thomas stared at Jesus. You understand that if this is a stunt, Thomas said, there will be consequences. There already are, Jesus replied. Thomas hesitated, then nodded once. Fine, 5 minutes. The conference room fell silent the moment Jesus stepped forward. Thomas crossed his arms. This document is written in a highly specialized form of Japanese. Our translators and scholars can barely identify fragments. With all due respect, you are not qualified. Jesus didn't argue. He simply reached for the document. Thomas hesitated, then against his own instincts let go. The paper crackled softly as Jesus lifted the first page. No notes, no dictionary. His eyes moved across the characters slowly. Then, with growing certainty, and then he began to speak. In the 15th day of the 8th month, Jesus read aloud, in the 20th year of the Showa era, I, Kenji Yamamoto of the Yamamoto line of Kyoto, write these words as witness to a truth I have hidden all my life. Every head snapped up. Jesus continued. I was born into honor and tradition. I was taught that family name was worth more than love, and obedience more than mercy. Thomas felt his throat tighten. In the year 1940, Jesus read, during a time when fear ruled our land, I met a woman. Her name was Park Min-seo. She was not of my people. She was not of my class. But she was gentle, and she saw me when no one else did. Margaret pressed a hand to her mouth. I loved her, Jesus said simply. And because I loved her, I was afraid. My family would never accept her, the words went on. So when she carried my child, I did what cowards do. I chose silence. I sent her away. I protected my name and abandoned my blood. Sakura's breath hitched. She gave birth to a daughter, Jesus Reed. I named her Yuki, my hidden joy, my lasting shame. Jesus paused not because he needed to, but because the room did. For years, he continued, I watched from a distance. I sent money. I sent apologies I never spoke aloud. But I never gave her my name. This document, Jesus said, lifting his eyes, was written so that lies would not outlive me. If my descendant comes before you holding these words, he read, know that she carries my blood. Because blood calls to blood. Dr. Tanaka stood slowly. This language. It's exact, he whispered. I do not leave this inheritance as payment for my failure, Jesus Reed. I leave it as acknowledgement of truth. Let my descendant receive what I denied her mother and her grandmother the right to be seen. Tears streamed down Sakura's face, silent and unstoppable. Jesus lowered the document gently. There is more, he said softly. But this is the heart of it. Thomas finally forced out, this needs verification. Verify it, Jesus replied. You should. Then he added, eyes resting on Thomas, but ask yourselves why you believed 5 experts who said it's impossible and doubted the truth standing in front of you. Dr. Tanaka picked up the document again, hands trembling. There's something else, he said. Something we all missed. He turned the pages over. Text, but not Japanese. Margaret frowned. That's not kanji. Dr. Tanaka swallowed hard. No, it isn't tea. Thomas looked up. Then what is it? Dr. Tanaka leaned closer, tracing the shapes with reverence. It's Aramaic. The room reacted at once. That's impossible, one expert said. Jesus spoke softly, completing the thought. He used the language of prayer. Jesus read, translating with quiet gravity. Guide my blood when I no longer can. Send the one who understands rejection. Let the carpenter who forgives cowards lead my child home. Margaret sat down slowly. So this wasn't just a will, she whispered. It was a prayer. Yes, Jesus said. A prayer that waited 60 years to be answered. Thomas rubbed his face. Then everything hiding the language, burying the truth, was meant to protect, Jesus said, not to deceive. The room understood something terrifyingly clear. This was no longer about inheritance. It was about redemption. Thomas Bradford gripped the edge of the table. This is absurd, he said. You expect us to believe a gardener can translate an ancient document, recount private family history, and claim divine insight. You don't have to believe me, Jesus said. Belief is never forced. He traced a line. Line 47. My true descendant will carry the moon that I carry. A crescent, Jesus clarified. A birthmark. Low on the back. Slightly to the right. That S specific, Margaret whispered. Kenji Yamamoto had that mark, Jesus said. Noted in medical records. Rare, passed through his bloodline. How would you know that? Thomas demanded. Jesus slowly rolled up his sleeves, then opened his hands. In the center of each palm was a scar, perfectly round. Old, Margaret gasped. Richard stumbled back. Dr. Tanaka removed his glasses. No, Thomas whispered. This is theater. Could they know what was written in a language no living scholar can fully read? Jesus asked softly. Could they know the prayer hidden on the reverse page? Could they know a mark no one in this room had ever spoken aloud? Jesus turned to Sakura, speaking in Japanese like a lullaby. May I? Sakura nodded. She lifted the back of her blouse just enough. There it was. A perfect crescent. Low right side. Thomas dropped to his knees. How? He whispered. Because when Kenji prayed alone, Jesus said, I was there. When he wrote those words in fear and hope, I was there. And when a 12-year-old girl crossed an ocean believing truth would protect her, I was there too. The room was no longer a room. It was holy ground. No one argued after that. Thomas straightened. We will verify everything. Immediately. Phones came out. Orders were given. The 3 independent labs, Thomas said. Stanford, UCLA Medical. 1 private forensic lab with no connection to this firm. I'll handle it, Richard said. It's your choice, Margaret told Sakura. I will, Sakura replied. I want the truth. Blood was drawn. Forms signed. The machinery of American law moved into motion. Jesus stood by the window quiet. 3 days passed. Thomas did not sleep. 2:47 a.m. on the 4th night, his phone rang. Mr. Bradford, a woman said. This is Dr. Elaine Foster from Stanford Genetics. We have the results. Margaret arrived in time to hear the call on speaker. The DNA comparison shows a 99.8% probability of direct lineage, the doctor said. Specifically, great-grandfather to great-granddaughter. Thomas closed his eyes. There is no margin for error, she finished. We ran the tests 3 times. Thomas thanked her and ended the call. Margaret whispered, she is telling the truth. Thomas nodded. His hands were shaking. He left his office. Down the elevator. Across the lobby. Into the garden. The Jesus was kneeling near a flower bed, sleeves rolled up, hands pressed into the soil. They were lilies, Jesus said without looking up. They take time. But they come back every year. The tests confirmed it, Thomas said. She's his. I know, Jesus replied. Thomas dropped to his knees beside him. I treated her like a lie, Thomas said. I saw a child who crossed an ocean alone. And I saw a problem. And now? Jesus asked. Now I see what I've been, Thomas whispered. Arrogant, blind. You can undo the past, Jesus said. But you can choose who you are next. I'll protect her, Thomas said. And I'll keep the vultures away. Jesus smiled gently. Then you're finally doing your job. Will you stay? Thomas asked. I'm already here, Jesus said. And for the first time in his life, Thomas Bradford understood what that meant. The results arrived on a gray Los Angeles morning. Low clouds pressed against the windows of Bradford Pierce, softening the city's skyline into muted shapes. Sakura sat at the conference table again, her feet still dangling above the floor, her hands folded tightly together, as if holding herself in place. Thomas Bradford stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear. Yes, he said quietly. I understand. Thank you. He ended the call. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he turned. It's confirmed, he said. 3 independent laboratories. No margin for error. Sakura held her breath. You are Kenji Yamamoto's great-granddaughter. The words didn't explode. They didn't echo. They settled. Sakura closed her eyes not in triumph, but in relief. The kind that comes after carrying something far too heavy for far too long. Margaret Foster reached for her hand. Richard Chen exhaled slowly, as if his body had finally remembered how to breathe. Even Jennifer, standing near the door, wiped at her eyes before quickly looking away. There's more, Thomas said. He lifted the translated document, his voice steadier now, grounded. Kenji Yamamoto did not leave the full estate directly to Sakura. Not because he doubted her, but because he understood what wealth can do to a child. $100 million will be placed in a protected trust, accessible when Sakura reaches the age of 25. Sakura listened, stunned. The $50 million will be allocated immediately for her education, healthcare, security, and guardianship. Thomas paused, then continued. The remaining $350 million. He looked directly at Sakura. Will be used to establish a foundation. A foundation for orphaned and immigrant children, Thomas read. Children without advocates. Without protection. Without voices. Sakura's chest tightened. The foundation will be named the Park Minseo Foundation, Thomas added softly, in honor of the woman Kenji loved and failed to defend. Tears slid down Sakura's cheeks. He remembered, she whispered. Didn't he forget us? I want to do it, she said with quiet certainty. The foundation. I want to help other children. Like me. No one questioned her. Not anymore. Later that afternoon, Thomas stepped alone into the garden behind the building. Jesus was there kneeling in the soil, pressing small white bulbs into the earth. What are those? Thomas asked. Lily of the valley, Jesus replied. They grow quietly. People overlook them, but they always return. Thomas knelt beside him. It's done, he said. She's protected. The foundation will be established immediately. Good, Jesus said. I treated her like a problem, Thomas confessed. Like a risk. You saw what the world trained you to see, Jesus said gently. Now you're relearning how to see differently. I'm resigning from the firm, Thomas said. I'll work pro bono. I'll help families like hers. Then you're beginning to understand, Jesus replied. Will we see you again? Thomas asked. You already do, Jesus said. Every time you choose compassion over judgment. He turned and walked down the path. By the time Thomas followed, the garden was empty. Only freshly planted flowers remained. 6 months later, the Park Mincio Foundation opened its doors. Children from dozens of countries found shelter, education, and legal protection. Sakura, now 13, stood at the entrance on opening day, cutting the ribbon with steady hands. Thomas watched from the side. He no longer wore tailored suits. He no longer needed them. That evening, an elderly woman approached him, selling small bundles of flowers. "Lily of the valley," she said kindly. Thomas bought them all. As he turned away, she added, "The gardener said you would understand." Later that night, Thomas found a folded note tucked among the flowers. "Do not look for me in power. Look for me in the overlooked. I never left. I simply moved where you weren't looking." Thomas pressed the note to his chest. And somewhere in Los Angeles, a girl who had crossed an ocean alone slept without fear for the first time in her life.